Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author and storyteller Russell Anders. Ever since the age of 4, Russell's been a storyteller. When his mom used to read him bedtime stories, he would ask, "And then what?" or "What happens next?" And finally, she said, "You tell me." Russell is somebody who can't just watch a movie without interjecting, how he might think it needs to go, or how they didn't do things right, and his friends will tell you, he can't just watch a movie to the end. So Russell is definitely an exciting storyteller, and so we're going to be interested in listening to him and talking to him over the next few minutes about his writings and everything that he's up to and going to be up to. So Russell, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Why don't you start out by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I think the introduction did a pretty good job on a lot of the salient points. I have been a long time writer, as you noted, and storyteller. I am relatively new to the world of published author, however. This has been a long journey for me. And I have discovered that being a writer is not the same at all as being an author. Being an author requires a much broader skill set. So I've spent decades studying storycraft and trying to get good. And then once I got my offer letter and broke into print, I discovered that there was a whole lot more I needed to know that I'm still working on. But I am very thankful for the opportunity to put my work out there. One of the things I came to know is that creative endeavors of almost all sorts, all kinds of art, are oftentimes solitary and sometimes isolating. But the end result is always something that is intended to be shared with other people. And so any opportunity that I get to share my work with others is one that I am grateful for.
Well, talk to the listeners about your publishing path.
So let me think. My very first piece that ever got published, I was in high school, and there was a small writers group that got together, and the local newspaper visited us. They were starting a column for young writers in the community, in the town. And so they figured when they heard of us, we would be a really good source. So they asked us for submissions, like if we had any right then and there. So this group was one where we would print up our material and read it to each other and give each other feedback and whatnot. So I had a short story that I had written. I handed it to them, and mine was the inaugural piece, which was pretty cool. I actually have that newspaper clipping on the wall in my house still, decades later. That was kind of it for a while. Then I lucked into a column for Dragon Magazine for a couple of years, writing material for Dungeons and Dragons. That did not pay the bills, but it was a really good fun money budget, and it was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Eventually, Dragon became more of an internal house engine. They contracted with people less and used staff writers more, so that eventually went away. And aside from a few contests here and there, I didn't really see much else. And that was okay for me, because one of the things that I discovered about myself is that I do better with and prefer writing long form. Short stories are okay. I do okay with them, but they're not my strength. I definitely prefer novel length stories, something longer that gives me the opportunity to really dive into the full spectrum of character development, build things up over time, and provide more opportunity for the reader to get to know the people in my stories so that when they change, when they face hard decisions, when things happen to them, there's more of an emotional connection. And so I spent the next several years working on figuring out how to write a novel. This is not my first novel. This is my first published novel. There were others. Some advice I saw once said, never publish your first book. Don't even try. And, in retrospect, I can see the wisdom of that, because my first book, I mean, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I did try to sell it. And I was told by a number of people, the writing itself is very good, but the book itself it's not for us. And I can look at it now and see that it has a lot of issues, but I have definitely found my home. And now I have a better idea of what I'm doing. So I finally managed to produce something that was, in fact, worth sharing with others.
Talk about where you get your ideas from.
There is an excellent article, and I wish I could cite the magazine it came from, but it was so long ago I don't remember. It was an interview with the author William Gibson of Neuromancer fame, who gave a short summary of some of the major events within the world at the time of the interview, but he phrased it in such a way that it sounded like science fiction. It was amazing. And so between that and another interview I read from a Scottish author named Warren Ellis, I get my ideas from the news from this world. I like to say I write about this world by writing about other worlds. Warren Ellis describes a process by which he binges on media, news, entertainment, all sorts of things. And he says he just dumps it into his subconscious and lets it swirl, mix together, ferment, and eventually some combination of elements combined with some shift of his own perspective comes bubbling up, and he gets a seed of a story. And I have found that to be a wonderfully effective method of idea generation for me as well. I simply try to stay aware of the world, and then I will find that there's some thing, an idea, an event, something that just sticks out for me. And with just a little bit of creative heat applied to that, I imagine how I can talk about it without being too on the nose. Start introducing some metaphor, and then once I have it through a slanted perspective, I can then begin to build something fictional around it. And this is oftentimes the case for the internal struggles that my characters have as well. A lot of times that'll start with something that I have experienced, but I'm not writing about myself ultimately. I imagine a character in an analogous situation, and then I let that build into whatever story arc emerges. And oftentimes that has nothing to do with what I went through, but the seed of it is there. And because I experienced it, I can write it with real authenticity.
Let's take a quick break.
In Kansas, blind vending operators are vanishing without a trace. No bodies, no witnesses, only silence. Detective Michael Miguel thought he had seen everything, but this case pulls him into something far darker. A web of institutional corruption so deep it was never meant to be uncovered. When vulnerable blind people disappear and bureaucracies close ranks, one question remains: who will fight for justice? As Miguel digs deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power, a system that exploits the very people it was designed to protect. The truth is buried in paperwork, hidden behind closed doors, guarded by those who have everything to lose. Some conspiracies hide in plain sight. This one hides in the dark. Iron Cane Media presents The Blind Conspiracy, written by Mikhail Battles Sr., available now on Amazon.
We'll talk about some of the most influential books that you have read throughout your career.
Certainly. So I think as far as fiction goes, one of my all-time favorites is The Wizard in Glass by Stephen King. It's actually book 4 inside of the Dark Tower series, but it's entirely a flashback, aside from a little bit at the beginning and the end that tie it to the broader narrative. But you can read it in isolation, and it was a masterclass in the application of a lot of the theories of good storycraft that I had read about in textbooks and resource manuals like that. So it was a fantastic example of how to put a lot of these things in play, as well as how they combined. Aside from just it had really excellent characters and a fantastic progression. It was just something that I had long been looking for a book that I couldn't put down. Not since I was a teenager did I find one that I found so compelling. And so when I very unintentionally stumbled upon this one, I was really happy, and it never left my mind. From a practical advice perspective, Stephen King again wrote another one called On Writing. And even though I wouldn't say that I hew to every single thing that he writes about in there, it was one of the most readable, one of the most accessible books on writing that I've encountered. And it, for me, had a number of ideas to consider when putting together prose that I have found really useful. It was instrumental to teaching me how writing interacts with the audience, and how to trust them as partners in the creative process, which is not something that I had seen before. And I found fascinating that, yes, I'm writing the story, but I do have an ideal reader in mind, a first reader, and I'm in partnership with this person in order to produce an experience for them, something I want to share, something I want them to have. That is a perspective I had never considered before, and it's one that I never forgot.
We'll talk about some of the best creative advice you received and why you feel like stories are so important.
Okay, 2 really different questions, but I like them both. The best creative advice I have ever received. I've received a lot of really good creative advice, but I think the one that has been at the forefront of my head most recently is give yourself permission to suck. Perfectionism can be absolutely crippling. Something that, a very popular topic that writers love to talk about is writer's block. And in my own personal experience, writer's block came from this idea that it had to be good. And so when I would start to write something and it wasn't good, I was immediately editing, even though I had barely written anything. And so this led me to just hit a brick wall. But this advice actually came from Dan Brown by way of Aerosmith. Give yourself permission to suck. Writing is an iterative process. Now, the way I think about it is That first draft is like pulling clay out of the ground, and I'm just going to slap the ugly wad of it, completely shapeless, right on the table. That's all I'm doing. I'm taking some ideas and I am putting them to words. They don't have to be eloquent words, they don't have to be pretty words, but they have to be words. That's all I'm doing for the first draft. The first draft, Hemingway famously said, the first draft is garbage. It doesn't have to be good, it just has to be done. Then when I go back and rewrite, well, now I don't have to worry about how to express ideas in words. I've got the words. Now all I have to do is make the words better. Remove the ones that aren't any good, polish the ones that are there that are worth keeping. And that kind of work iteratively prevents me from getting block, because each piece doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just doing a little bit each time. Writing is rewriting. And that has been so good in keeping me going. Even just, this month as I'm writing, and I can just see it as I'm writing it on the page. Like, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. And I said, doesn't matter. I'll fix it. I'll fix it in the next draft. I just need to keep writing it right now. And it's been fantastic. It has been a invaluable piece of advice. As for the power of story, I have become a huge believer in story and narrative. I came across some information not long ago when I was reading another book about how stories are fundamentally our core means of communication. The first things that we did when we started to build a civilization were to tell stories. And it was through those stories that we passed our most important lessons. These days, sure, everybody can just receive data dumps, but our brains are still wired for story. We can receive raw information, but if we are given a narrative instead, our retention is better, our attention is better, and our comprehension is better. They stick with us and they shape us. So the stories that we tell and the stories that we expose ourselves to not only inform us, but on a really fundamental level, affect the way that we think, the way that we feel, the way that we see the world. It's not just the information. It's the way that these stories frame these things. So yes, I absolutely want to entertain people with my books. I don't want to bore anyone. But at the same time, I hope that the stories that I tell will also affect the way that people see things, the way they think about things, and hopefully change the way that we are to one another for the better. I have no illusions that I'm going to change the world, but maybe I can nudge that needle by just a fraction of an inch.
We'll talk about what it means to be an intentional audience and why is it valuable.
To be an intentional audience is to critically engage with the material in front of you. I think it's really important. If you are just a blanket consumer, you don't give much thought to what comes in, then you're not erecting any kind of filter for yourself and leaving yourself wide open for all of that influence that I just talked about without any awareness of it. Just because you're not really thinking about it doesn't mean that you're not affected. But if you critically engage with the material, then first of all, you can get more out of it. Just from an entertainment perspective, as you noted in your introduction, I am famous amongst my friends for not just watching a film. After we're done, I will uh, I will review it rather strenuously. Um, I remember recently when I had gone to see a film with a friend of mine that I did not like at all. Um, Credits rolled, lights came up. She looked at me, saw my face, took a deep breath, and said, "Okay, tell me." And for the next 45 minutes, boy, did I. Um, but when that works to my favor, when there's something that's really good, because I critically engage with it at that level, I can get so much more out of it than just, hey, that was fun. And I think by being aware of the stories that we take in, we can get more out of them, not just the entertainment value, but really like dig in and see the ramifications of the various decisions the characters make and the message of the story, and be just be more engaged with it.
What is the difference between cyberpunk of the 80s and today?
Okay. So cyberpunk of the 80s, the catchphrase that I was most aware of is science fiction that is 5 minutes in the future. It's definitely futuristic, but it's attainable. Right? We're not talking about faster than light travel and energy weapons and teleportation. It's the computers are smaller, they're more powerful. The internet is more pervasive. I mean, back then there even wasn't an internet, but obviously it was attainable stuff. We have a lot of the technology of the cyberpunk of the 80s. We also have a lot of the society that the cyberpunk of the 80s showed us. The cyberpunk of today it's more, I think, interested in ideas of cognition and personhood. AI is a much bigger deal now than it was then. Even though Neuromancer, one of the very first cyberpunk books, it did deal with AIs as entities, but that wasn't really what the book was about. Now it's more questions of transhumanism and emerging artificial consciousnesses and what constitutes a person. It's a little bit more esoteric, I think, than the 80s cyberpunk, which felt a little more grounded to me.
Talk about what role magic has in a science fiction book.
Well, I can tell you what role magic has in my science fiction book, because I do think that there's a wide variety of uses it can have in the genre as a whole, just like there's a million different variants of fantasy. For me, I wanted to integrate magic because the kind of cyberpunk I wanted to write was a little bit more of a throwback to the 80s. I wasn't interested as much as in the question of what constitutes a person. I was drawn to the elements of cyberpunk that were a little bit more societal. Massive wealth gap, runaway corporatism, huge corporate powers, the idea of people as property, that kind of thing. And the systemic systems that I created in my book were largely dehumanizing. Human resources, not people. Magic comes from the folklore that we have had for centuries. And it's the magic that I use is all deeply personal. So, for example, in my first book, the magic deals with the devil. It's not benign magic at all. It is quite malignant, but it is personal. There is no corporation that can batch print infernal contracts for 100 people. Each one of those contracts needs to be negotiated one-on-one with one person about what they want and what they are going to pay. They become individuals again in that arrangement. And it's an exercise in free will, which is something that in a lot of corporate structures, most people don't have. They simply follow their marching orders. And even, in those cases, those tend to be depersonalized. And it's just, here's the corporate handbook, follow the rules. There's nothing individual about it. So the magic served to reintroduce personhood to make them human again, and not resources, not interchangeable cogs within a larger corporate system.
Tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
So at the insistence of a friend of mine who works in marketing, he thought that there would be a fair bit of crossover interest between my novel and a tabletop role-playing game, which is another hobby I've been involved in since I was 6. I resisted that for a long time. I just didn't feel like it was appropriate, but he would not let it go. And I eventually knuckled under and I wrote it. And for the last 5 or 6 months, I've actually been running the inaugural play test with a couple of people who turned it into an actual play podcast, which is out there now. So anyone who is interested in hearing another manifestation of that same basic situation can find that. The game itself is finalizing its testing. I already have a layout and a cover artist, so I'll be looking to release that before the end of the year. The audiobook is slotted to come out sometime in June, and I am maybe 2 weeks away from finishing the first draft of my next novel, which is again a more 80s style cyberpunk with magic. This time, different Earth, different characters, different corporations, different magic system, but that same conflict between the human essence and the dehumanizing corporate structures.
Well, so everybody can keep up with everything that you're up to, throw out your contact info.
So you can find me on various social media. I'm on Facebook under Russell Anders. I am on Instagram, Russell Anders Author, and I have a website, russellandersbooks.com.
Close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
I would say that if I had to do a closing thought, I would say the thing I try to convey in my work, whether you read it or not, I want everyone to hear that no matter what the situation is, your choices always matter, and it is never too late to do the right thing.
Well said, ladies and gentlemen. russellandersbooks.com is the website. Please be sure to check him out, pick up the book, check out everything that he's up to and going to be up to. Follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Also, to keep up with everything the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast is up to, please visit www.curveball337.com and share the website and the show to everybody that you know. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Russell, thank you for all that you do and shedding lights on the importance of stories. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.